Welcome to CSA Global. My name is Sam Ulrich. I'm a Principal Consultant in CSA Global's corporate team based in Perth, Australia. This is the third in a series of short presentations investigating greenhouse gas emissions in gold mining globally. If you missed the first two presentations, which provide an introduction to greenhouse gas emissions and a detailed look at greenhouse gas emissions in Australia's gold mines, they can be accessed via CSA Global's website and LinkedIn page. The information in this presentation comes from a working project investigating greenhouse gas emissions from gold mines globally. The greenhouse gas emissions data comes from 194 gold mines in 35 countries. These mines accounted for 49 million ounces of gold production, or 44% of global gold production in 2018. A quick recap to the previous presentation. Here is the greenhouse gas emissions intensity curve for Australian gold mines as at 30th of June 2018. The greenhouse gas emissions intensities range from just under 250 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per ounce to just over 1,000 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per ounce. How do the greenhouse gas emissions from Australia's gold industry compare globally? Presented here as a greenhouse gas emissions intensity curve are the country-weighted average greenhouse gas emissions intensities. Finland has the lowest and South Africa over 20 times greater the highest. Compared to the other countries, Australia is at the higher end of the emissions intensity curve with a weighted average emissions intensity of 637 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per ounce. Canada's average is 261 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per ounce, just a bit higher than Australia's lowest greenhouse gas emissions intensity mine, whereas South Africa's average is over 1,000 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per ounce, higher than Australia's highest greenhouse gas emissions intensity mine. The Macassa mine in Canada has the lowest greenhouse gas emissions intensity of 53 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per ounce. Macassa benefits from low emissions energy. It is a high-grade underground mine and uses almost an entirely electric mining fleet. 100 times higher is the Cook mine in South Africa, with 5,262 kilograms or 5.3 tons of CO2 equivalent per ounce. For China, the world's largest gold producer, there is presently no individual mine greenhouse gas emissions data. Based on a life cycle assessment study, an estimated emissions intensity was derived of 1,220 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per ounce. Placing it between Mauritania and Greece, numbers 32 and 33 on the emissions intensity curve. The primary reason for the differences between countries is the source of the country's energy. Countries with access to low emissions energy versus those with high emissions energy dominated by fossil fuels. Another way to view the greenhouse gas emissions intensity is geographically. Of the world's top 5 gold producing countries, Canada has the lowest greenhouse gas emissions intensity, followed by the USA, Australia, Russia, and it is estimated China has the highest. In general, South American gold mines have a lower greenhouse gas emissions intensity due to the greater access to low emissions energy, wind, solar, and hydroelectricity. The emissions intensity in West Africa is very similar for most countries apart from Mauritania due to having a similar energy mix. South Africa really sticks out from the rest of the world for the wrong reasons. With respect to greenhouse gas emissions intensity, competitive advantage exists between countries due to their electricity mix. Countries with low emissions energy have a big advantage over high emissions energy or fossil fuel dependent countries. Here we have the example of Canada, Australia and South Africa, which have weighted average emissions intensities of 261, 637, 2,754 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per ounce, respectively. Canada has a clear advantage over Australia and South Africa in terms of greenhouse gas emissions intensity by 2.5 and 10 times respectively, with Australia having a greenhouse gas emissions intensity 4 times less than South Africa. Most of Canada's grid electricity comes from low emission sources, hydroelectricity and nuclear, whereas in Australia about 80% comes from coal and natural gas. South Africa's electricity comes from even more emissions-intensive brown coal. Additionally, a lot of their gold mines are greater than 2 kilometres deep, have older infrastructure requiring considerable energy to ventilate and cool. When you consider the greenhouse gas emissions intensity is the equivalent to carbon intensity, and carbon intensity can act as a proxy for carbon risk, i.e. the higher the carbon intensity, the higher the carbon risk, and vice versa. What implications do these variations in greenhouse gas emissions intensity have on investment or financial decisions? Climate risks are financial risks. What are some of the financial, investment, and value implications of carbon risk? When looking at it from the view that higher greenhouse gas emissions intensity means a higher carbon risk and vice versa. Companies, institutional funds, and lenders are being asked to increase disclosure on and mitigate climate risks through lowering their greenhouse gas emissions footprints. This pressure is leading to not investing in companies and assets with a higher carbon risk, which will lead to companies disposing of or discontinuing high greenhouse gas emissions intensity mining operations if methods to abate greenhouse gas emissions are not feasible. Having a lower carbon risk allows companies access to lower cost equity and debt capital, which implies a higher firm value to a comparative company with a higher carbon risk. This impact on value has also been shown for companies showing a strong carbon risk awareness, i.e. good disclosure on greenhouse gas emissions and carbon risk mitigation. The impact of a carbon price is very different for mines with a low greenhouse gas emissions intensity, i.e. low carbon risk, compared to mines with a high greenhouse gas emissions intensity due to the effect on production costs. For example, using a US $100 per ton carbon price, the individual increases to production costs at gold mines around the world ranges from US $5 an ounce to over US $500 per ounce, something I will explore more in my next presentation. Undertaking activities to abate greenhouse gas emissions by energy substitution and energy efficiencies reduces the greenhouse gas emissions intensity, hence carbon risk. I will look at the different methods used to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in a later presentation. Not addressing carbon risk, could this lead to potential stranded assets in the gold industry? Is there the potential for gold from a low emissions footprint to be valued more than gold from a high emissions footprint, i.e. a low carbon green gold premium, like with low carbon aluminium? Stay tuned for future presentations in the series where I investigate the impact a hypothetical carbon price would have on the gold industry in terms of costs in different jurisdictions. Look at the methods companies are using to abate their greenhouse gas emissions and heading towards a greener future for gold mining. Contact marketing@csaglobal.com if you would like more information on this presentation or the paper on greenhouse gas emissions in Australian gold mines. Visit CSA Global's website for this and other presentations. Thank you for listening.